Welcome all back to Scott's Sporting Corner. Well, what a 7 days it has been. I haven't really had a chance to come on here and properly give my thoughts and opinions due to having a guest on the show and spending time researching Iraola for the last episode that I did do. I really enjoyed that one, to be fair, but it's certainly been a whirlwind of a week. It was only last Saturday around midday that Arne Slot parted ways with Liverpool Football Club. Fast forward to Thursday, and Andoni Iraola was officially confirmed as Liverpool's new head coach, signing a 2-year deal. I have to admit, when I first saw it was only a 2-year contract, I was slightly underwhelmed. However, after hearing that Iraola has always preferred shorter deals throughout his managerial career, it has reassured me. In fact, I quite like the idea. He's essentially saying he wants to earn the right to stay at the club rather than relying on long-term contracts. Football clubs also shouldn't be keeping managers simply because they're tied down for longer durations, and that is basically paraphrasing what he kind of said previously on about that. That being said, perhaps kind of cynical of me when I think about that. When you look at short-term contracts, the more renewals they have due to this, which would lead to more renewals, more demand for him, the more money for him and his agent. But that's kind of a cynical point of me looking out for that. But overall, though, I am really excited. I spoke on here only a few weeks ago about how Iraola would be one I preferred candidate after Alonso had gone to Chelsea and stuff like this. And after listening to his interviews, I am even more excited. He seems to really understand the club and what Liverpool is all about. However, what has surprised me is some of the mixed reactions I've been hearing from fans, pundits, and former Liverpool players. I've heard people question his win percentages, his lack of silverware, and comparing him to managers who have stepped up from smaller clubs and struggled compared to when they've gone to bigger clubs. So let's break those arguments down. Firstly, the win percentage argument for me is a lazy analysis because it completely ignores context. You got to remember, you can't just use one stat to judge someone. You have to look at the full picture. If you haven't already, please go back and listen to the previous episode where I went through Iraola's managerial career. It gives full context, and one thing what stands out for me is how he's improved every club that he's managed over that period of time. Instead of focusing purely on the win percentages, look at what he achieved at Bournemouth. In just 3 years, he took a club what has been flirting with relegation and transformed them. In his first season, he delivered their highest ever Premier League points total. He followed that up with a top half finish and guided them afterwards to 6th place in the Premier League, agonising so close to the Champions League but guaranteeing them Europa League qualification. Finishing just one result, like I said, away from that Champions League football. It could have been like if they won, they could have got a bit closer, or if we'd beat who did we play last game of the season, or have we played now? Brentford, and Villa lost. If we went above them, then that would have meant that Bournemouth would have got the 6th place for the Champions League. So they were so close to it. This was despite losing 3 members of their back 4 previously in the summer, and now seeing in the January you got someone like Antoine Semenyo leave as well. So they had all that in one kind of summer and transfer window. Well, January transfer window, should I say. Those are significant setbacks that many managers would have struggled to overcome. Secondly, let's look at the argument that he hasn't won silverware and that managers from smaller clubs often fail when stepping up. Firstly, Bournemouth aren't a mid-table club anymore. Iraola has turned them into a European club. Secondly, every manager's comparison needs context. Take, for example, Graham Potter moving from Brighton to Chelsea. Brighton had already established a strong structure and recruitment model that had made successive managers successful, should I say, meaning that it wasn't just Potter who was successful there. De Zerbi was successful there. Previous managers to them were successful as well. However, then he went to Chelsea, which he walked into chaos at Chelsea under the new management. On top of that, I've seen arguments with David Moyes, who inherited arguably one of the most difficult jobs in football when he replaced Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. He took over an ageing squad and was never really given enough time to rebuild that. Another manager, which I've heard use an example to kind of compare them to Andoni Iraola, is Thomas Frank, when he went from Brentford to Tottenham. But Spurs just finished 17th the previous season, then repeated the same finish while dealing with huge injury crisis that reportedly even led to an internal investigation into club's injury record. On the other hand of this, there are plenty of managers where it has worked out. There've been great examples of this, and I think the first one we should touch on is the kind of reigning Premier League champions, and I think now he is the Premier League manager of the season, or he's picked up a award from one of the governing bodies anyway. That's Mikel Arteta. He had never managed before he became the Arsenal manager. He was the assistant at Manchester City under Pep Guardiola, but he'd never actually managed. But since then, he's won major honours and turned Arsenal back into genuine title contenders. They've gone and won the Premier League this season. He won the FA Cup in his first season. They've also got to League Cup final and a Champions League final. And I think if you look at the body of work over the last 4 years, he's finished second, and now first. So they've probably become one of the most consistent teams in the Premier League. And this is the manager who has taken a team what had kind of been written off by many, that club, Arsenal, when he first took over. And I remember one of the seasons when he kind of ripped the squad up. I think after 3 games, they'd lost 3, the bottom of the league on a minus goal difference. But even then, he still managed to turn that around, and now they are Premier League champions. Our very own Jurgen Klopp moved from Mainz to Borussia Dortmund, where he took Mainz from the second division into the first division, very similar to Iraola with Rayo Vallecano, from the second division in Spain up to the first division in Spain. But he'd never experienced managing a top big team in that country, and he moved from Mainz to Germany, where he went on to win 2 Bundesliga titles, a domestic cup, and reached a Champions League final as well. And of course, one of the other biggest ones is Bill Shankly, one of Liverpool's greatest ever managers. He arrived from Huddersfield Town, who were in the second division at the time, as were Liverpool at the time. He took Liverpool from there to win the second division. Then he went on to win 3 league titles, 2 FA Cups, and a UEFA Cup as well. The point that you can find from the examples to support either argument, so you can say this supports this supports that. What matters is where the manager is and is the right fit for the club. Personally, I believe Iraola is a perfect fit for Liverpool. His high-intensity, front-footed style and football matches, should I say, gives the identity that Liverpool supporters want to see. There's only one bit of caution that I do have with Iraola's system. It doesn't always click immediately. In previous jobs, there have been periods where results suffered, where players adapted to the style. It took a bit longer than what was expected, and it's actually quite similar to Jurgen Klopp's approach in that respect. If one cog in the machine is out of place when you set that press, that Gegen press, counter press, full court press, whatever you want to call it, then the entire press can become ineffective, so patience will be required. As I've said before, I'd rather see a clear structure and identity developing, even if that means dropping points early on, than watch a team scraping results even on long-term, without any long-term direction, I should say, as we've seen previously in last season. But moving on, there's been some other news surrounding Liverpool over the last week or so, and shortly after the announcement of Iraola, and to be honest with you, I actually thought after Iraola got announced we would try and see some movement in the market before the World Cup started. As we've got that much to do, it wouldn't surprise me if before the World Cup starts we do manage to get somebody in. And it actually got reported by David Ornstein at Liverpool having strongly linked with Yan Diomande, and we are actually in fact in pole position. While Fabrizio Romano suggests that Liverpool have made one of the strongest offers financially. And I've always felt Liverpool would have the better chance than PSG to get Yan Diomande. And it's more likely for a couple of reasons, to be honest with you. Mainly because he would be a regular starter for Liverpool. There's a place in the team ready for him. But if you think about that, there's 2 reasons why that would benefit us to get Diomande. Surely he'd prefer to come and play for us week in, week out, than potentially be the new Bradley Barcola at PSG, where he'd be coming off the bench a lot. But also you would suggest, because he would be a starter for us, that we are more likely to sanction that type of financial package to get him rather than PSG. If he's not always going to be a starter, you think players they've got, Kvaratskhelia, Dembele, Doué, and still Barcola at the moment, other attackers such as Ramos play up top as well, would they still have the kind of motivation to want to, how can I word it, basically sanction that type of move for him? I don't know if that would be as strong as it would be for us to do that. That being said, I could be completely wrong, and to be honest, I'm quite hopeless when it comes to predicting transfers and contracts. For example, I thought Konate would stay, and I also thought Josh Abe would leave the club. Thankfully, it looks like Josh Abe is staying. the young talent who turns 16 next month, has reportedly rejected approaches from Manchester City, Man United, Chelsea, and clubs from abroad. Some reports even suggesting that he's turned down £50,000 per week because his family believe that Liverpool offers him a greater pathway to first team football rather than the other clubs. And apparently he's going to sign a scholarship with Liverpool when he turns 16 next month, and then when he turns 17 the following year, he will sign his first professional contract at Liverpool Football Club. Very similar to Rio Ngumoha, where he sees the pathway at Liverpool is the right one for him to get into the first team. Speaking of Rio as well, some mad stories come out from David Ornstein and from Germany last night, on Friday night, that Bayern Munich were being strongly linked with him. I think they'd seen, the reporting was that he'd become a very big target for them on that left-hand side, even though they'd have Luis Diaz over on there. But Liverpool quickly rebuffed that, any interest, and said he's not for sale now and he won't be in the future. Personally, I think it's largely media noise. It could be Bayern attempting to unsettle the player, or perhaps his representatives trying to strengthen their negotiation position ahead of a new contract. Rio turns 18 in a couple of months, which means he can sign a longer professional deal. From Liverpool's perspective, I don't think there's any reason to panic. The club clearly see him as a huge part of the future, and all signs suggest they'll do everything possible to keep him at Anfield. And yeah, like I said, the cynical side of me believes that's probably his agent, to be honest, as they'll want to, use that narrative to fuel a higher contract demand for him. But yeah, this has just been kind of a roundup of the news that I've seen over the last couple of days for Liverpool. We might try and do these once a week over the summer. I've got a couple of podcasts lined up for next week, which I'll mention in a moment. But there has been some other comments from Federico Chiesa, which I'll probably touch on next week as well. I'm using a different headset on this one as I am currently away, so I hope it has worked out okay, and I'm hoping as well, because it's Saturday evening here, that I can get this uploaded today on Spotify and on Patreon. But also now we're going to put in every episode we do now, we're going to put on the YouTube as well, which got quite a lot of views last time, so I'm really chuffed about that. But yeah, before I wrap things up, I just want to give you all a little look ahead to what's coming up in the podcast over the next week. So I've got some fantastic episodes lined up over the next few weeks, and I'm really looking forward to sharing them with you. I'll be joined by Sean from AKM LFC, where I'll be taking a deep dive into the media narrative surrounding Liverpool and discussing whether the coverage of the club is fair or certain stories are being pushed for clicks, headlines, or different narratives overall. We'll also be looking at Liverpool players heading off to the World Cup, discussing who could have a big tournament and what impact could have on Liverpool season when they return. And of course, we'll be looking at Andoni Iraola and what he needs to do with this Liverpool squad before the season gets underway, as there areas that need strengthening, which players fit this system, and what should Liverpool prioritise before the transfer window closes. So make sure you're following the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, and if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and a review. It really helps the show grow and reach more Liverpool fans. Thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of Scott's Sporting Corner.